to Vladimir Putin's speech there from Moscow.
Добрый день.
Good morning,
Уважаемые депутаты
everybody,
Федерального собрания, сенаторы, депутаты
ladies and
Госдумы,
gentlemen,
уважаемые граждане России.
senators, members of
Сегодняшним
parliament,
посланием я
members of the
выступаю
Duma,
в сложное, мы
citizens
все
of
об этом
Russia.
хорошо знаем, рубежное для
In
нашей
my
страны время.
address, I
В период
am
кардинальных,
speaking to you at a
необратимых
time
перемен
which is
во всем
important,
мире.
complex,
Важнейших
and
исторических событий, которые
very
определяют будущее нашей
decisive
страны и нашего
for
народа.
our country and the whole world. There are historic events which are going to define the future of our people, and each of us is in a colossal realm of responsibility. A year ago, for the safety of our country and the safety of our citizens in some of the territories of Ukraine, since 2014, there had been the occupation of those regions. So for that security, we carried out all the actions which we had to. Since 2014, Donbass has been fighting for its right to live in its own territory and speak its own language. It refused to give way to the blockade of hate of the Kiev regime and was hoping for aid from Russia, and were waiting for it. They believed that we would come. However, we were doing everything we could to solve that problem in a peaceful way. We were patient. We carried out negotiations to avoid getting into this harsh conflict. But behind our backs, another scenario was unrolling. The European leaders and Western leaders were in fact acting so that time would be bought, so that the possibility of the Kiev regime would occur, that with political assassinations and other humiliations in the Donbass. In the Western schools, the military Western schools, the idea was to start providing weapons and training special forces. There were negotiations between Kiev and the Westerners so that air defense systems would be provided and other heavy weapons. And the Ukrainian regime went as far as asking for aid from nuclear weapons, and the Western powers were organizing secret laboratories for biological weapons, and they were getting ready to provide everything needed to Kiev for a big war. And this is what is now happening. They've done this completely shamelessly. In the same the format of Normandy was just a bluff. Blood was being shed in the Donbass, and Russia was trying to find a pacific solution. While life and death was occurring for people out there with false cards. A lot of decoys and destruction. They destroyed Iraq, Libya, Syria, and it's a shame that they'll never be able to free themselves from the notions that honor is being trod upon. They think they can go on despising the whole world and despising their own countries. They also have cheated their own people by claiming that they were trying to seek peaceful solutions, including at the Security Council for the Donbass But all this was just a pack of lies and a systematic disinformation. In fact, it's not just us and our interests to stop this distinction between countries which are so-called civilized in the world and other ones, and to use that to allow them to be even more aggressive. We were ready to have an open dialogue with the Western world. We needed a security system to be found together, and we wanted to work on it. And the answers we got were either hypocritical or confused. And on the contrary, they were moving NATO closer to our borders. They were deploying a bigger setup for air missile defense. They were trying to get closer to our borders and pushing their umbrella. And no country in the world has as many bases outside of its territory than the United States. They have hundreds of military bases everywhere in the world. The planet is consolated by American military bases, and we've seen that they pulled out of international agreements, such as the one on medium-range weapons, and those were the systems that guaranteed peace in the world. Why are they doing this? No, they don't do anything without having a secret agenda. In December, we'd sent NATO and the United States some proposals for peace agreements. And we had included the vital points for us. Well, what we got as an answer directly was just no, categorically no. And that means that they had already agreed among themselves for aggression and threat for it to go on, and for that situation to escalate. In February 22, we launched a punitive action in the Donbass, and that corresponds to the 2014 action against Donbass. We remember what happened then when Donetsk was attacked, not just Donetsk, but other cities. In 2015, they tried again. They attacked Donbass, and they pursued the blockade, and this was against all the resolutions of the Security Council, and it was still done. It's them who launched the war in 2014 and 15, and we were led to use force to stop that war they were leading. Those who thought of a new attack on Lugansk or Luva or Donetsk will remember Crimea and Sebastopol and the objectives which were very openly laid down by Kyiv. We know full well what we are doing. We are defending the life of people, the life of our men. And the Western world has already spent more than $50 billion to support Ukraine and Kyiv, and in 2021 only $61 billion were spent to support the poorest countries in the world. So 150 against 60. It's obvious the countries receiving the aid needed to submit to the will of those powers, and the money that flows for war, there's no end to it. They are also other areas in the world where they are creating unrest. There have been attacks against Russia in the meetings of Munich, and the attacks were just probably to cover up for all their different attacks in the world. There were whole regions that were thrown into chaos. Even American experts say that the follow-up of war, in the aftermath of war, is that were launched in have led to 900,000 people dying and 31 million people being refugees around the world. And that is such a state of things that people had to forget about it, but nobody will forget. So these tragedies
триллионы долларов. Возможность и дальше обкрадывать всех, прикрываясь словами о демократии и свободах.
Not something that can be put aside. There are millions of dollars which are spent to set up systems which are supposed to be democratic in the world, and in fact they're just other authoritarian systems. We have to they have to give to paint the enemy black so that their own corruption scandals can be covered up and forgotten, so that their internal economic problems are put aside. At the beginning of the 20th century, the Western world had plans and actions which opened the path to Nazism, and it is now a pattern that is happening again. Destruction of Russia by taking away from it Ukraine is the dream of Austria, Hungary, of the Empire of Germany, and it led to the putsch of 2014, which was anti-constitutional. It's like if nothing had happened. Things don't change. There is Russia-phobia, which is at the bottom of everything that happened, and we are ashamed to hear that the special Ukrainian units have called themselves Edelweiss, which is the same name as the German forces who were invaders, and it's quite symbolic. And on the Ukrainian tanks, the neo-Nazi emblems are quite visible, and I'm quite surprised that in the Western world nobody's really paid attention to this. Well, it just shows that they do not care, because what they care for is to fight Russia. It's important for them to have an opportunity to fight Russia. And whatever happens, whether it's terrorists somewhere or anyone in the world who's against Russia, they'll be happy to go along. There's something they want to retaliate for. They want to create conflict situations at our borders. It's the same pattern all along in the whole 20th century. It's to turn any form of action against Russia. We are not waging war with the Ukrainians. We know that they are in a hostage situation. They've been politically and militarily occupied by the Westerners, and the Ukrainian industry and natural riches were plundered, and it's led to social degradation. And it's really not difficult to see why military actions have to be launched. It was all prepared. The idea was to turn them into war victims, and the responsibility of the Western elites, military elites, of a lot of foreigners to the Ukrainian regime. They are not trying to support the interests of the Ukrainian people. They are just using this as a butthead against us. They want to take it further. They have launched new offensives, and the more the long-range weapons of the Westerners will be delivered to Ukraine, the more we must push back this threat on our borders. The Western elites don't even hide their objectives. They want a strategic defeat of Russia. What does that mean? It means to wipe out Russia once and for all, for this local conflict to be aligned with the worldwide confrontation. And this is why we have to react. And we have reacted as we should, because it's the existence of our country that is threatened. You have to realize that to bring Russia down militarily is impossible. That is why they attack us on the field of the press or the media. They try and influence young people. They pervert historical facts to change history and show us under a different light. What are they doing with their people? They're talking about destruction. Themselves are good at destruction of their social values. They are pedophiliacs and other criminals who practice. There are homosexual marriages which are perfectly allowed over there. And of course, I'm not trying to suggest we should interfere in people's private lives, but just look at what it says in the scriptures, in all religions of the world. Family is the alliance between a man and a woman, and not between same-sex people. Even those sacred texts are shown in a bad light or are thrown into doubt. Apparently, the American churches want to create the image of a God that doesn't have agenda. They don't know what they're doing. Millions of people in the Western world are about to fall to the hands of a moral catastrophe. They are on the verge of dementia. And we need to defend our children against this moral degradation, this loss of values. Obviously, the Western world is going to try and shake our society. They are going to pan in on the traitors who themselves have turned against their own fatherland, and they are ready to pay them to do that. Some have chosen the path of treason, and we shall never do as the regime of Kiev and give way to Western ideas and give in to Western powers. We're not going to either try and persecute those who have sidestepped. It's them who have their conscience that is probably against them. But I can give you lots of examples of citizens who are capable of putting that sort of behavior at its right level. In the multinational context, fortunately, there are many people who understand our action, and we have the support in the real patriotic movement that is happening. It's a historical moment for the Russian people who is expressing this will to take its destiny into its own hands. And friends, I would like to thank you all, to thank the Russian people for this courage, this resolution. I would like to thank our heroes of our army, of our navy, of the Russian Guard. I would like to thank the volunteers, those who are participating in the Basque group, and I can't name everybody. Sorry, when I was preparing my speech, I thought of so many. I had such a long list of all those who are fighting for the cause. I can't name them all. So those who weren't mentioned, I apologize for them. I thank the families, the wives, the mothers of soldiers. Also, I would like to salute the doctors, the nurses, the railway staff, the civil engineers, who are rebuilding the infrastructure, those who work in the armament industry 24 hours a day, those who are farmers, and everyone involved in the health and security of our country, and also the teachers who are working with the young generation, the workers in hard conditions near the front, the actors of culture who come and present shows in hospitals, journalists, war correspondents who tell the world the truth, and also priests and heads of various religions who help the fighters, entrepreneurs who also do their professional duty, civic, human duty. I'd like also to thank more especially the inhabitants of the Donetsk, Lugansk, and Kherson regions, because you yourselves, you took a referendum for your future. It was not easy. You were close to the combat, but nothing is stronger than a resolution as expressed in that way to be in your country, Russia. We've started and we shall go on.
Хочу подчеркнуть, что эта реакция зала в адрес жителей Донецка.
I would like to underline that this reaction of the audience is a sign for the inhabitants of the Donbass, and it's a homage. We are going to increase a campaign for these new topics of the Federation. We need to regenerate the job offer and industries. We'll have to rebuild roads, such as in Crimea, where we now have much better connections. We're going to continue to give all our support to the region of Donetsk, Lugansk, and Kherson and Zaporozhye. We are now reunited. We have become stronger together, and this land, which is ours, is going to become a peaceful and prosperous land once again. For that, for that purpose, for our ancestors, for the future generations, for re-establishing justice, our heroes and our soldiers are still fighting. And I would like to ask you to pay homage to those who have given their lives, in particular in the civil population.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Мы все понимаем. Я понимаю, как невыносимо тяжело сейчас женам, сыновьям, дочерям павших.
How difficult it is for the spouses, the children of the people who gave their lives for the cause. It's like in the big patriotic war when we fought Nazism. There is a spirit of sacrifice and a high spiritual level. We need to support those who've lost their dear ones. There's a generation of fighters who gave their lives, who need to be supported, to whom we should pay tribute. We need to create a fund, a national state fund to give personal help to all the members of the families of victims of the special military operation. It will be a help which can be medical or psychological or social, or help for holidays or sport or training, vocational training. This fund will allow support to be given for those who are disabled, for their lives to be improved. So all this needs to be set up, and this new fund will operate as simply as possible with a single window to support each of the families of the victims. Of those who gave their lives fighting. Each of those families needs to obtain the help they are owed. The setup of this fund will be deployed in all the regions of the Federation of Russia. Already there is some help for the former combatants of the big war, and this new fund will take care of the victims of the special operations and will be done with the help of the regions and the municipalities, who will have to list the former combatants who are in their district, so that everyone gets the help they need. We also need to go to the front line to carry some help of that type. Those the soldiers who are either volunteers or part of the army need reinforcement. I understand by the numerous appeals to me that there is insufficient provision of various needs, and everybody can understand that it is a very heavy going to provide everything each mobilized person needs, each military part of the special operations, to provide for everything so that they can have some rest time of at least 2 weeks every 6 months. Every soldier should be able to come back for 2 weeks every 6 months. That is fair. Dear colleagues, we have a plan for this. We also have a plan for rebuilding the armed forces from 21 to 25. This is a plan in order to strengthen our forces of the army and marine and navy, and we have to take stock of the experience of the special operation. It's very important to re-equip our forces and nuclear forces. We have to reach a level of preparation of at least 90% in all the areas of the military force. The officers we have demonstrated their great ability to carry out their duties, and they however, they need to get further training. This is quite necessary in the military area as well as in civilian forces, in all the decision bodies. Those men need to understand that their country is in a position to use the best they can give, and we have the technical means, we have high-quality forces, very much superior to their counterparts in other countries, but we need to step up the production of our weapons. And we need to do this based on our scientific and technical means. We will have more procurement by the army. Our industry armament uses young talent from people who, in line with our tradition, will do everything they can towards the victory. We're going to reinforce the workers' collectives. We're going to increase the salaries so that the armament industry can provide housing to its staff at prices which the government will subsidize. We had this discussion. This program needs to be developed, and we're working on it in full detail so that the subsidized housing is developed in the cities where the armament industry is based, and also where research and development are carried out. It's not exactly a military action. It's not what the Western world thinks. They launched economic attacks against us, but they haven't achieved anything. Sanctions actually punish those who have declared them. In those countries, they are having to close their industries, and they say all the time it's because of the Russians. But what means were used in this aggression? They tried to cut the links with the Russian enterprise. They use misinformation to prevent our companies from selling to them. There's been actually a theft of our reserves in international currencies, and they said themselves, we need them to suffer, but in fact their own citizens are suffering. They want to make us suffer, make our citizens suffer. They want to destabilize us, but they got it wrong. In fact, we are so resilient. Our economy is much more resilient than they thought, thanks to our government, the parliament, the Bank of Russia, our enterprise, our workers. Thanks to all that, we were able to stay firm, to keep up our levels of employment and not let shortages occur. We took some measures. We were able to support our economy and maintain our economic activity. And I'm telling you, it's in millions, billions that they tried to sap us, and we still have a solid basis for our economy. In 2022, we had a a drop of the GDP. And I want to talk about this. It's something that was released yesterday, but that is that we had been told that our economy would drop by 25%. But in 2022, we had a drop of 2.1% of our GDP compared to last year at the same time. So when they predicted our economy would drop through the bottom, not at all, because we changed our system. We turned to reliable partners, and in fact there are a lot of them in the world. Compared to December 21, we have in fact reserves that have increased, and half of our currency reserves has been put aside, and we've created international financial regulations which make us independent from the dollar and other strong currencies. So those are in fact losing their universal characteristic, and it's not our fault, it's theirs. Themselves. They did it to themselves. And you know the expression, butter or guns. Of course, the defense of a country is the most important. We mustn't repeat the errors of the past and let our war economy sag. And we need to have the conditions for a safe development of our economy. And we're still continuing along those terms and that logic.
Так, многие базовые, подчеркну, именно гражданские отрасли отечественной экономики за прошлый год не только не сократили, а значительно нарастили производство.
Industrial sectors were not only didn't lose, but they have extended and strengthened.
And we've just been listening to the Russian President Vladimir Putin there.